Martin, another gorgeous summer's day, and here we are reflecting on our Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. Jesus asleep in a boat in the midst of a storm on the Sea of Galilee, woken by terrified disciples who say, "Lord, Lord, help us." What's going on here?
My thoughts about what's going on. So, a couple of observations. First of all, what's the boat like? And apparently, I read recently, someone uncovered a 1st century fishing boat, I think from, the silt in the bottom of the Sea of Galilee or somewhere.
Wow.
But somewhere in that vicinity. So we've got a fairly good idea what a boat like this might look like. So apparently it's 26.5 feet long, it's 7.5 feet wide and 4.5 feet high, and has decks at each end, so under which Jesus would have been.
So you could get
asleep.
plenty of shut-eye.
You could lie down under the deck
Now,
and
just
sleep.
Just one other thing about the Sea of Galilee, in case people think, well, it couldn't have been much of a storm. Apparently, on the western shores of the Sea of Galilee, in the car parks, they have warning about swamping of the car parks because of the winds that can blow up, and you can be tossed around like anything in a boat like that.
Yeah.
So these are serious storms.
Storms come up very quickly. So that's the first thing about the boat. The other thing I noticed in the Greek, there are 3 greats. So there is a great storm, a great calm,
And a cheese grate.
and then
No.
and then the great fear of the disciples when they realise that Jesus has calmed the storm.
Huh.
Who is this who can calm the wind and the waves? And then behind that, you've got this issue of faith, because Jesus says, did you not have faith? And there are 2 dimensions to that. One is to have faith like Jesus, the faith that enables you to go to sleep in the boat.
Of Jesus, yeah.
And the other is to have faith in Jesus, to trust in Jesus, that with him things will be all right.
And a big debate in New Testament now, isn't there, about, translations, particularly in Paul, of where Paul is really saying have faith in Jesus or has the faith of Jesus. So yeah.
And I think, for me it's helpful to just use the word trust as well, because we've given lots of accretions to the word faith, which I think renders it less helpful at times. And then there are 2 ways of looking at this. I mean, it's not my idea, but other people say there are 2 ways of looking at this story. One is that it's the sort of cosmic manifestation of what we've been hearing about the kingdom in the parables that Jesus has been telling immediately before this story. So the parables of the seed and so
the mustard seed and all that. Yeah.
And that here we have the power of the king, as it were, the royal power being demonstrated as being over all the forces of nature. So this is, in the realm of God, in the kingdom of God. It's not just perhaps dimensions of human existence that are affected. It is the whole of creation that is affected. The second interpretation was a very early interpretation, I think, going back to Tertullian and following on, is to see this as an image of the church. And so Mark's readers would have identified themselves perhaps as, like the disciples in the boat, tossed around on the sea, wondering whether they're going to survive, and forgetting that Jesus is asleep, and actually everything will be all right. And that's a lesson for us today. I mean, we go on and on about how we're being tossed about in the stormy seas of this world, forgetting that Jesus is asleep and will calm the waves for us.
Yeah, which is interesting because Mark in chapter 4 here, in chapter 6 and in chapter 8 3 boat scenes, all of which are to do with this Jesus' relationship with his disciples, isn't it? And springboards for a teaching of Jesus to his disciples. So he clearly uses that fairly frequently. And interesting about how he calls it the Sea of Galilee, which by anybody's reckoning isn't much of a sea. And the illusions that some people say are being cast up by that. Because if we think about sea for somebody with a Jewish background, what do you think of when you think of, you know, being in a storm like that? Well, first of all, you might think of Jonah. Here's God creating a storm until you throw this person over the side of the boat. But of course, it turns out to be the opposite of that, that actually God in Jesus is in the boat and actually the one who calms the storm. So this is the opposite of Jonah. Behind that, you've got this theme about Exodus and the parting of the Red Sea. You know, and it's a new Exodus, new liberation that's being led by Jesus. And behind that, you've got the Psalms and Daniel 7, and you've got this idea about someone in the form of the Son of Man who is able to banish the demons and the darkness that lurk in the deep. So you've got all of those illusions going on, haven't you?
And the Jonah one is interesting because Jonah was sent to the people of Nineveh and he didn't want to go. You can read this as going over to the other side of the lake is to go over to the Gentiles. So it's the mission to the Gentiles, but we're not sure we want to go there. And Jesus is the one who calms the way to that mission, which of course for Mark's readers would have been hugely significant.
And as usual, the disciples come in for a bit of a drubbing here because, you know, they don't know what's going on and they wake Jesus up. But, you know, credit where credit is due, they wake Jesus up. They know that the solution to this lies in waking him up and asking him, do you not care that we are perishing? In other words, they know that he cares that they're perishing. And then, of course, you have him calming with a word. And the power of the word, again, is emphasized here. That, you know, God creates things by calling them into being. The power of the word seen here with Jesus. And then this curious use of this term, you of little faiths, oligopistoi, to refer to the disciples. The point being, presumably, that Jesus was so kind of at one with his Father that he was able to sleep in the midst of a considerable storm and was trusting that whatever happened, it would be all right. So my assumption is that when he says oligopistoi, or you little faith, he's saying, what if you drowned? What's the problem? Which is pushing it a little bit, but you know, Jesus doesn't appear to, and therefore, what's the lesson for us from this? We will be tempested in this life, as Julian of Norwich puts it, and as it's put in the Sermon on the Mount. Nevertheless, this is a faith, this is a trust that is to eclipse that tempesting, come what may. And you know, part of the challenge. Are we going to trust in the words that Jesus utter in the midst of the storms of our life? So it's immediately applicable, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, thank you very much.